All right. Hello and welcome aboard another edition of the Gallant Says podcast, live at youtube.com/Paul Gallant, twitch.tv/Gallant Says, twitter.com/Gallant Says, facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports. It is Sunday, December 10th of 2023, and the Houston Texans just got their asses kicked by the New York Jets 30-6 today at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey. Just a fucking terrible game. Terrible game. It would have been one thing if this was just a dud of a game like it was in the first half the whole way through, and the Texans lose on a field goal or a late touchdown or something like this. But the big problem for the Texans this season, a team that is coached by D'Amico Ryans, a guy that you look at and say to yourself, this guy's a defensive-minded coach. The amount of times that the Texans have lost a game to a team without a traditionally good quarterback, or that quarterback has looked great, is quite honestly jarring, to be polite. Starts in week 2. Anthony Richardson goes down after touchdowns on the first 2 drives of the game for Indy. In comes Gardner Minshew, who goes 19-23 the rest of the way for 171 yards and a touchdown. Great performance, no, but a good performance. Then go a little bit later in the year. Texans are playing the Falcons in Atlanta. Desmond Ridder, who would eventually be benched, has his best game of his career. 28 of 37 for 329 yards and a touchdown. Then a little bit later, after the bye week, Bryce Young, who has stunk this season, the reason Frank Reich is out of a job, 22 of 31 for 235 yards and a touchdown in a 15-13 win over the Texans. The Texans 0-3 in these games that I've just listed, and then you've got today. But today, it's not just that it's a subpar quarterback doing it. It's a guy in Zach Wilson who earlier in the week was supposedly reluctant when it comes to even wanting to start for the New York Jets as he tries to keep his career alive. He goes 27 of 36 for 301 yards and 2 touchdowns. Garrett Wilson. Crossers to Wilson and comebacks to Wilson were easy all game long. He's a great receiver. 9 catches for 108 yards, though. I thought Derek Stingley was the defensive player of the week. You got Steven Nelson on the other side. Breece Hall out of the backfield. Maybe this is because of some of the injuries that the Texans are dealing with at linebacker. Blake Cashman gets hurt in this game, but 8 catches for 86 yards and a touchdown. And tight ends down the seam, Tyler Conklin, Jeremy Ruckert. Who the fuck are those two? No offense to those two. Those guys are doing whatever they wanted against you. You got a coach in D'Amico Ryans who should have you ready to go against a guy like this, especially in a weather game like this where there's rain and there's wind, and that guy carves you up. What the fuck? That's all I really got to say is, what the fuck? It's Zach Wilson. They pressured him. They sacked him 4 times. Christian Harris had that nice punch out on him. And it's not like the offense helped them out at all. The Texans offense did not exist today. But Zach Wilson throwing to Garrett Wilson should not be what it was today. And in the third quarter, there was a moment before that Zach Wilson fumble where I believe that the Jets had something like 170 total yards to the Texans 0 in the quarter. And if not for that fumble, we're probably talking about a 30-0 victory for the Jets. So we'll talk about the offense in a moment, but coming out of this game, this has been a year-long problem for the Texans. And where with the offense, you could say the offensive line, the injuries at receiver, the weather, the Jets defense is good. Like, there's excuses to make for the offense. For the defense, I don't know what excuse you make. It's crazy that they keep on having these horrible performances against guys who are backup quarterbacks in this league. Let's read some comments here. Mick Martinez on Facebook.com/PaulGallantSports asks, does John Mechie just suck? I think that's an extreme thing to ask. This is a guy that has spent a lot of the last 2 years just trying to get to a point where he can play football again. I suppose I'm making excuses for him. It's clear that he is not living up to second-round billing. So when you don't have Nico Collins and you don't have Tank Dell, he's at the top. I don't really know who the go-to guy for the Texans is with those guys, injured Dell and Collins, but the receivers for the Texans today did not have a good game. They couldn't get open. The Jets, of course, have a good defense. Sauce Gardner's a good corner. DJ Reed's a good corner. But Noah Brown, Robert Woods, John Mechie, Xavier Hutchinson, yeah, it's not enough with those four. So I guess that's my fence walk, Mick. It's Shakel makes a great point. We need to win more games. I agree. I mean, the worst part about this today is that this loss to the fucking Jets, of all teams, puts you in the 9 spot in the AFC because the Bengals beat the Colts. The Bengals would be the last team in the playoffs if the season ended today, and the Browns beat the Jaguars. So you would be tied at 8-5 with the Jaguars had you won today. Instead, 7-6, the 9 seed, and also would have taken a step past the Indianapolis Colts. But nope, you're back in 3rd place. And you're going to need some help to get into the playoffs, which is awful. More comments, youtube.com/Paul Gallant. Rock says, the Texans enter this game with the dumbest game plan for the rain I've ever seen. Calling plays like it was good weather. And the bad part is the running game wasn't bad when they actually ran. I agree. My biggest issue with what the Texans offense did today was about how they handled right before halftime. So you have all 3 timeouts. You get to about the 40-yard line, and they just decide to let the clock run, and then C.J. Stroud gets sacked. They should have called a timeout and kept running the football. Now, I don't know if they would have gotten very far into Jets territory, given how well the Jets defense played and how bad the Texans offense played in this game. Nico Collins was out of the game at this moment in time. But running the football when the Texans actually did run the football, it wasn't terrible. It was better than C.J. Stroud throwing, that's for fucking sure. Stroud's numbers today are really, really bad. This is easily the worst performance he'll have this season. That's before the concussion happened. He was 10-23 for 91 yards. He got sacked 4 times. 4 yards per attempt. Good God, that is brutal. More comments, youtube.com/Paul Gallant. Someone said the Texans were too busy making Tank Dell t-shirts. Well, listen, that's the marketing team. That's the promo team. But yeah, not great. Nick Martinez says, Andrew Beck, your deep thread at facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports. Yep, you're right. Toro McJohnson comments, everyone's favorited closeted homosexual, Paul Gallant, allegedly. What was funny was on Friday on the radio show, we started off doing the show from inside a closet, and then we had to move outside of the closet. So you can bet your bottom dollar that I had some fun with that. More comments, youtube.com/Paul Gallant. I told the rather excitable Texans fans what was going to happen. The Texans always choke on these games. They play down to their opposition. That is for sure. I mean, shit, it was 8 straight one-score games. This was the first game that I went into thinking to myself, the Texans will win this game. You got to go back. It's a young team, blah, blah, blah. You can make excuses if you want, but we all got to go back to saying that we don't really know what they're going to do on any given Sunday. But a game like this, I mean, they had so much, the Jets, drama this week, potentially distracting them, and a quarterback who maybe didn't want to be out there. And the kid played great. Wilson had a great game. I'll give him a lot of credit for it. He's pretty good at extending plays, evading the rush, made a couple of impressive plays, and outside of the fumble, really did nothing that hurt the Jets, which was stunning. Truly, you would have thought, like, if there's somebody who's going to make mistakes in this game, it's going to be Wilson, not Stroud. But Stroud made a couple. Stroud was lucky that there weren't more interceptions. And also, take a look at that muff punt that Desmond King had inside the 5-yard line. Like, the Texans were trying to give this thing away, and it could have been actually worse than it ultimately ended up being. More comments. Saduk Semisen comments, youtube.com/Paul Gallant. If you're a bad quarterback fighting for his job, play the Texans for your get-right game. Yeah, you might get a 10-year career out of playing the Houston Texans. Henry Weems comments, you'd think the Texans were on the way to the Super Bowl the way people here were acting. They never learned. I know, it was a win over the Broncos. I don't think there was anything to really be cocky about, but more, you look at the schedule, you look at the opportunity for them with a banged-up Zach Wilson, and like, hey, the AFC South is perhaps, back. Texans Box 94. Paul, you said we were going to win for sure. We got blown out. Yeah, I know. I'm never going to make a prediction again. Predictions, they only go bad. If I get it right, what am I going to do? Like pat myself on the back or something like that? Robert Ross comments, Noah Brown and Robert Woods did nothing. Yeah, there was one play that got the Texans got bailed out with a 5-yard contact, and it bounced off of, I want to say both Woods and Brown on the play. It had Woods caught it would have, in a immaculate reception-esque ricochet, it would have 100% been a long touchdown for the Texans. Mick Martinez argues, facebook.com/Paul Gallant Sports, that the Texans should run Devin Singletary more. Today, yes. And perhaps a little bit misleading the statistics, 13 carries for 65 yards and a touchdown, but man, they just could not get anything going. Let's take a look at what they were doing in all these drives. Drive 1, 5 plays, punt. They ran the ball 1 play. They threw the ball 4 plays on that drive. Okay. The one run was 3 yards. Not great. Drive 2. 1, 2, 3 runs. No gain. 16 yards. 4 yards. And they had a 3rd and 6, and Stroud got sacked for a big loss. After that, they didn't run the ball a lot. 2 runs the next drive. Damian Pierce was in the game. No gain, 3 yards. 3 and out. Singletary for 2. Singletary for 5. 3rd and 3. It's an incomplete pass. Next drive. 3 and out. Singletary for 5. Then a penalty. Singletary for 1. 3rd and 9. Incomplete pass. Okay, well, if you take a look at the drive chart, yeah, it doesn't seem like they ran the ball as much as they could have. And then that drive right before halftime, Singletary has that 9-yard run right before Stroud gets sacked. And there you go. I'm just reading a drive chart. It's fucking boring sounding. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant. Noah Brown had 5 targets, had as many catches as me. Yep, that's true. The worst teams with struggling quarterbacks seem to always have their best game against the Texans. Shaking my head. You're right. Conservative defensive play calling by D'Amico. I agree. I am not going to act like I'm some defensive mastermind, but a guy like Zach Wilson, you want to force him into fucking up. And it never felt like the Texans were doing that. They would show a lot of looks at the line of scrimmage like they were going to blitz, and then they would drop everybody back, and maybe they thought that by doing that would lead to Wilson doing something, but they should have just all-out blitzed Wilson a lot. Wilson will make some really dumb mistakes when he makes mistakes. But today, he didn't make any. You got to force him to make it. He's one of those guys where if you blitz him, he's probably not going to tear you apart. He's probably not. Even with Garrett Wilson as one of the receivers, he's probably not going to shred you. Typical Gallant says, Mick, we're going to win and we get blown out. I know. My kitchen is dirty comments, twitch.tv/Gallant says, Deshaun Jackson is at home sitting by the phone. Yeah, they got to call him. Rock comments, youtube.com/Paul Gallant. The Texans have a very obvious weak spot on the defense, and that is linebacker. They cannot cover anyone. Yeah, bad day for covering running backs. And also a bad day for covering tight ends, specifically down the seam. Not great. Eric B comments, youtube.com/Paul Gallant. I like Damian Pierce, but I'm so tired of seeing him run into brick walls. Ain't that the truth? Something weird happened last week against the Broncos where they just went away from Devin Singletary for a long period of time and went to Damian Pierce. I don't know if Singletary was banged up in that moment, but yeah. Let's read some of the comments that have to do with the excuses for the offense. The Texans don't have an O-line and no backfield help, says Buddy Rowe. So there's a lot of excuses that you can make for the Houston Texans offense today and all those punts, 8. 0 for 3 on 4th down. I think 1 for 11 on 3rd down. Tank Dell and Nico Collins were hurt. The offensive line has had a lot of injuries, and the weather clearly had an impact in this game. Plus, the Jets' defense is good. Like, I think there are some excuses that you can make for the Texans' offense, but whether it's Bobby Slug's play calling or just a matter of shitty execution with drops and with sacks and with bad throws and the thrumble that Stroud had to the sideline. I don't know what the hell was going on there. It really was one of those performances where I think you got to ignore all those excuses. Like, I get it. It's the Jets, but the Jets did not get going until the second half. When they got going in the second half, the Texans never figured it out defensively, but, I mean, they kept getting the ball, and they just couldn't do anything with it except for on the one time where the Jets fumbled, and then they marched right down the field. I was surprised that they didn't try to involve the running backs more in the passing game after that Beck catch and run. But here we are. Just an awful performance. Just taking a look at the numbers. I mean, they're just depressing. Brevin Jordan, your leading receiver, 3 catches for 35 yards. Your wide receivers, Collins, who left with an injury. He had the 1 catch for 13 yards. Your receivers after Nico Collins, Noah Brown, 5 targets, 0 catches. Robert Woods, 3 targets, 1 catch for -2 yards. Remember, he caught that screen early on. He bobbled it. Looked like the weather maybe was impacting that. So Robert Woods, Xavier Hutchinson, and John Mechie combined for, let's do a little crack math here, 4 catches for 19 yards on, let's see, 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 5 on 16 targets. Oh my God, that is brutal. That is brutal. Holy fuck, man. Da Rhino says the New York Jets commentators' lives are acting like the Jets won the Super Bowl. Well, they might think that they can get something out of Zach Wilson the rest of the way, maybe trade something for him or something like that in the offseason. But listen, they won. If the Jake Asmans of the world and others are going to be happy about a victory, like they have every right to. The Jets kicked the Texans' ass today. And I think defensively, it's confirmation for the Jets that this is a defense that, if they had a healthy quarterback, we're probably talking about them as having like 6, 7 wins or something like that right now, right? The defense is really good. Nicholas Melcher says, CJ should not have been in the game. What do you mean by that? Like, he didn't suffer the concussion until later. Why do you think that he shouldn't have been in the game? It's Sunday. If you're a quarterback, you play. You don't not play the quarterback to protect him. That's fucking dumb. So I'd like an explanation on that comment, Nicholas. A little bit more than just he should not have been in the game. Saduk's Misen, I'm so bad at pronouncing your handle. Saduke MSN says Garrett Wilson was open the entire day. Yeah, he was. He was. Eric Marquez comments, what are we going to do about wide receiver depth if Nico is out next week? Yeah, good question. You're going to have to make it work with these guys, and it really feels like Xavier Hutchinson's more of a gadget player. Someone they feel comfortable using on like speed sweeps and things like that. But yeah, between Brown and Robert Woods, I don't really know what to make of today, but those two today, it was bad. And it's not to say that some of the catches that they would have had to make that you could argue were drops were things that they should have done. Like, I can't get mad at some of those catches that would have been really difficult. I really can't. Because you played in shitty weather like that, where it's a little chilly and you're not sure whether or not you want to wear gloves. Like, it is pretty tricky. So I'm going to give a little bit of the benefit of the doubt on some of the like borderline drops. But if it hits you in the hand, I get why a lot of people are like, well, it hit you in the hand. You got to catch it. And there were a couple of moments for those two receivers. More comments. Manny, CCTX, comments. Suddenly, the rest of the schedule looks a lot harder. Ain't that the truth? And it's a shame because, I mean, the rest of the way, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. You had the Jets. You have 2 games against the Titans. Titans are up next. A home game against the Browns. But with the way the Browns looked against the Jaguars today, yeah, I don't feel great about that. You should win the last 4 games, I think. Like, I would guess the Texans will be favored in all 4 of those games. But it's a loss like this that does make you lose a lot of faith in this team's ability this year. And I think that expectations are very difficult to manage because expectations change. Like, going into the year, I think we all just wanted this team to have a pulse. Well, now they have a pulse, but you want more than the pulse. You always want more than what you're seeing. And this is just a shitty performance. Ugh. Yeah. Chosen one. Texans blow. Maxwell 77. Our entire team stinks and are injured. We should just take the rest of the season off. Come on. Jesus. What's the update on Stroud? Here's what's going to happen. He's probably going to go into the concussion protocol. And we'll see if he's ready to go next Sunday. But I do think it is on the table where he potentially misses that game. He whipped his head very hard when he hit the ground on that one play. I'm sorry, I'm yawning. I was up until 5 in the morning last night. I had a white elephant party. I mean, listen, the Texans sucked, but you know what did not suck? It's getting a Nerf gun for Christmas, huh? This advertisement was not brought to you by Nerf. But I don't know, man. Is this going to get me canceled if I Oh no, the Texans! Ooh, there we go. It's like a rapid fire gun. Look at this thing. Wait, let's see if we can hit something. This thing's fun. Better than the Texans. Damn, that fucked my hair up pretty good. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant. You want to comment? You can also join on Twitch, twitch.tv/Gallant Says. Twitter as well at Gallant Says. Jarrett says, if CJ's out for more than 1 week, this season is a wrap. Yeah, probably. What do you want me to say? More comments here. At the time he got injured, Stroud, the game was decided. Well, okay, but it's a quarterback. You're going to tell that quarterback to leave the game. So after the series was done, they probably shouldn't have left him in for another play. They probably should have taken him out. And I think they did take him out, didn't they? I thought they took him out as soon as he was slow to get up. Because I think the NFL now, as we saw in that Broncos game, the NFL steps in and basically says, nah, dude, you got to get off the field. Tora McJohnson prediction, Texans against Colts will be flexed to primetime. Maybe. I mean, it depends on if they're playing for a playoff spot, I think, at the very end. That last game of the year is always tricky as well when it comes to flexing. Common Sense 200 comments, youtube.com/Paul Gallant. Since CJ's in the concussion protocol, does that mean he's out next week as well? Is there a mandatory minimum? There isn't, but I bet they will be rather cautious with him this week. Buddy Rowe comments, how about a new kicker? I don't understand why Amendola is still on the team. Easier to find one than not easy to find one. That's the answer. Amendola is not good. I think they thought Fairbairn would be back by now. It's pretty crazy how much they've missed Fairbairn. As soon as Fairbairn's ready to go, I think he will be back there. Paul Lopez says, I'm not really high on Mechie anymore. He gets 0 separation. Yeah, and the Jets have a good defensive backfield, so that also was a factor today, no doubt about it. Bob's 4 comments, this year was already a success. Yes, I agree. Totally agree. It's been a success. It's just frustrating to lose like this to the fucking Jets. It's the Jets. The Jets are the biggest joke in NFL history. I get that they have a Super Bowl. Blah, 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 blah. They're a fucking joke. And when you get pushed around like this by a team quarterbacked by Zach Wilson, I mean, it's just embarrassing. It's just embarrassing. Texas Tag comments, they got humbled. Right you are. Right you are. So there you go, guys. I feel like we're kind of down. I don't think the season is over. But given the happenings of today, where the Jaguars lost and the Colts lost, you could have really put yourself in great shape as far as making the playoffs, gained a little bit of separation from some of the teams that you're competing with. But depending on the result of the Chiefs-Bills game that's in progress right now, I think the Texans could find themselves as a team in 10th place by the end of today. And man, that's a bummer. No game plan for that kind of weather. And the MetLife Field turf is horrible. I get that, but you can't make excuses for the offense when C.J. Stroud was looking like the best player in the NFL at times this year. Maybe not the whole time this season, but I mean, he has found his way into the MVP conversation. He is the Rookie of the Year. The Jets defense held him sub 50% passing and to less than 100 yards. That is hard to do in 2023. It really is. They sacked him 4 times as well. More comments, youtube.com/Paul Gallant or twitch.tv/Gallant says. Saduk MSN comments, Levis might throw for 400 yards next week. Might? Yeah, I think now going forward, you got to go to mybookie.ag, promo code bet975. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere. Only with MyBookie. You got to go there, and when you go to that website, you got to look for the over for passing yards for whoever is going up against the Texans from a quarterback perspective, which is crazy because we're talking about a team that should be good defensively. You know, you had 2 guys this past week that were arguably Defensive Player of the Week. And that's another factor, too. So, more injuries in today's game where you lost C.J. Stroud to a concussion, you lost Nico Collins to a calf injury. Blake Cashman, your nickel corner, Tavier Thomas, and Will Anderson all left this game as well with injuries. So, you already have no Titus Howard. Dalton Schultz was out. Tank Dell was out. You are missing a lot of pieces. But this Jets team shouldn't kick your ass like that because you're missing a few pieces or because the weather outside is weather. So there you go, guys. That's an absolute embarrassing dud of a loss to a team that you had no business losing to on a day where the Jaguars and the Colts lost. Pretty shitty Sunday. It's going to wrap things up here. YouTube.com/Paul Gallant, Twitch.tv/Gallant says. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe the podcast. You can also get it in podcast form, Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. If you ever have a question, you can send an email to gallantsays@gmail.com. So long, farewell, have yourselves a wonderful Sunday. Radio show tomorrow at 10 a.m. ESPN 97.5 and 92.5.